Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and it's also particularly special to be introduced by your son. So thank you, Harry. I appreciate that. Well, as Christ followers, we believe in an unchangeable God. But one of the things that we also believe in is that our life is one of constant transformation as we grow into his likeness. And this morning, one of my favourite things is to listen to what Joy shared this morning, and that is the personal narrative of God impacting your life. So Joy, I want to recognise it again and say thank you. That was just a wonderful for us to be able to hear that and listen. So thank you very much. About a year ago, I was sitting one day and I just asked myself the question, how did I get here? And I just had this moment of just not realising what had happened to get to where I was. And so I made the decision to be very intentional about reflecting back on my entire life and identifying the sections and the impact that God had had on every single way. And as part of doing that, I said, I really want something physical or tangible to help me understand that journey and to recognise it. So I did two things. The first thing I did is I actually sat down and wrote out every season of my life, and I did put it into a book, and I called it A Journey Through 8 Jackets. And this is sort of an overview of God's influence and impact on my life. And the second thing that I wanted to do is to actually have some of these jackets that I can grab a hold of and reflect of as part of that journey. And so that's what I want to share this morning. And simply the purpose of sharing is to identify God's influence and impact. So let me first start off with what I call the cowboy vest. And I know I've shared some of these at a breakfast here before. It's only the first couple, but I'll do all 8 today. And so when I was 6 years old, this is this season of life that I call family, my mum made this cowboy vest for me out of a small piece of vinyl. When it was first made, it actually had a nice purple cord which did up those eye holes in the middle there. And when I wore this, it was putting on a superpower jacket. When I wore this, I could ride bucking bulls or at the very least a sleepy old horse. I also had a metal gun in a holster around my waist that I wore at the same time, and we could basically save anything that was wrong with the world in that season of life. And so if I think about that season of life, I think about really focused on family. I grew up on a cattle property west of Rockhampton. My great-grandfather had settled on that land in the early 1900s. As each generation went on, the property was expanded. And so by the time that I was born, I was living in the same area where my grandfather still lived on the original property. 4 out of his 7 kids lived on neighbouring properties. I have 42 first cousins, and the bulk of those 42 first cousins all lived within 10 kilometres of where we grew up. I'm one of 6 children. My parents had 6 kids in 6 years. So by the time they were 25, they had their 6 children. And so we were very close together in age. Every single week it was a Bible study or a Sunday school at our place early in the morning. We would all go to church together. We'd always have Wednesday night Bible studies together. We would all go to the very same small state school together. And if I think about my childhood, it was one deeply embedded in faith. It was also the time that I met my wife. And so she was 5 and I was 6 when we first met each other. She was on a property close by, and we went to the same little state school as well. One of the things that I wanted to intentionally do about this journey is to think about where I currently am as the principal of Redlands College and to try and identify how I got there. And so at each stage, I want to talk about a connection with Redlands College. Well, my mum grew up at Wynnum. She went to Wynnum Church of Christ, which is the same church that Alan Todd, the founding headmaster of Redlands College, went to. They were close friends and at school together. By the time my father was sort of getting on past the age of 18, his father said, "You've got to get married." So he drove down to Wynnum. He only allocated 1 weekend for it. Went to Wynnum Church of Christ. Met my mother there on that day. They were engaged shortly after and married. So it was a very intentional focus there. And so as a child growing up, my parents, all I knew was my parents being very close friends with the people who started Redlands College. Ross and Elaine Leggett, who were the people who actually gave a large portion of their personal money towards buying the land that Redlands College were built on, were very close friends with my parents. So close, in fact, that they got married on the same day and they honeymooned together. So a long connection with those people who were involved in that school. So my next season of life was what I call All About Friends, and this is the campfire jacket, this one here. My brother and I were in Scouts. And we came home from Scouts one day and said, Mum, there's a jamboree on tomorrow and we need to have a jamboree jacket. Every single person will be wearing a jamboree jacket. And Mum said, well, I haven't heard anything. Nobody told me anything. I said, well, we're telling you, Mum, that's got to be the case. And so we went to bed and we woke up in the morning and there on the end of our bed were these jamboree jackets. My mum had stayed up overnight to make these jackets. Once again, you'll see the same theme with tassels on the bottom and a little bit of a cord in the front there. So we put them on and went to the jamboree, and of course we were the only two people not in Scout uniform. And so we'd obviously confused the message. But we absolutely loved these campfire jackets. And so we wore these jackets on family holidays. If you can think of a couple of strange-looking brothers. That was my brother and I as we wore these, but we also sewed badges on of different places that we visited to in those different areas. If I can think about my personal life at this time, friends were starting to become just as important as family as I started to branch out. I remember playing in the 1981 football grand final. I'm on the top right of the photo here, obviously with no shoes, and really started to absolutely love school. I was also very good friends with my future wife, Danielle, who was there in that same school. However, family was still the most important thing to me. My only goal in life was to become a farmer, as this photo shows. I did not have any capacity at all to conceptualise a future job or a future world beyond where we lived and beyond the rural work that my parents and extended family did. On the 9th of May 1982, at the age of 10, I was baptised. And I remember this as a significant point in committing myself to Christ and wanting to live my life as a Christian. I had known God my whole life, but I remember when I was baptised, this overwhelming sense of conviction to strive to reflect Him in my life. And so during this season of life, every single year at Christmas time, my family would drive down from Rockhampton down to Brisbane and we would go to a church family camp. And at this church family camp, I remember sitting around and listening to this group of adults who were planning to build this new Christian school in Brisbane. And they were constantly talking about how they would have a Christian school which would impact the lives of these families. And that was this pioneering generation who all started Redlands College. And I remember listening into those conversations in the mid-1980s. So move ahead to 1988, and this is the season that I call exposure, because I went on a youth exchange to the United States of America. And this is the blazer that I wore on that youth exchange, this here. Now, last time I was here, I actually put it on, and so I can still fit into this jacket, but I won't do that today. But one of the things that I like is actually physically putting that jacket on, because there's something really interesting, you think needs to happen? There's something really interesting about putting it on that actually takes my mind back to when I was wearing that. Very first time I left home I was away from my family for more than 4 days. Very first time I was on a plane. Very first time I travelled overseas. Very first time I saw snow in my life. Wearing this jacket and remembering this jacket helps me understand this incredible turning point in life of this broader exposure. And so I was 16 years old. I went to Colorado. So if you can imagine going from a rocky summer to a Colorado winter and living with a family over there. But one of the things that I particularly enjoyed about that time was to realise that suddenly the world was bigger than a cattle property in central Queensland. From a personal perspective, it was the first time in my life that I recognised that there were people who not only didn't know God, but were actually adversarial towards a God that they didn't believe in. And I found that incredible, because at 16, and the first time in my life, I was in a context where I was not surrounded by people who were Christians and Christ followers. I got a very short glimpse of the opportunity that we have to share God's love with people who don't know Him. And the very first time ever that I thought I might be something different than a farmer. And I clearly remember that. And so this is the reason why I'm so passionate. At Redlands College, as a core part of our learning program, we require every student in Year 9 to go to our campus in Vanuatu and spend 2 weeks in Vanuatu. We have no extra fees for that. It's part of what we do because we believe in it passionately. They're in Vanuatu, they live in dormitories together, they go to the local markets, they buy their food, they cook their meals, they serve in the local area, they get to understand what it looks like to live to serve others and not just to focus on yourself. It's a transformational age in life, and we believe in it passionately as a community. And I can think back to that age and the impact that it had in the US. From a Redlands perspective, the year I was in the US is the same year that Redlands College commenced. And my parents drove down from Rockhampton for the opening ceremony on the 20th of August 1988, which is when that photo is. My parents had been financial donors of Redlands College, and the ceremony took place where the junior school covered area is. And I remember my parents driving home from that opening ceremony and saying to us kids, "You won't believe this Christian school. It's educating kids from Christian homes as well as others with a Christian faith." And from that day on, we started praying regularly as a family for Redlands College. Praying for the staff that worked there, praying for the students that went there, and praying also for the future families that would be engaged in that community. And so the next season of life is a season that I call transition. And it's this shirt here, and it's very old and a very grubby shirt. But if I open it up, it says on the front here, Camp Nottawees. If you can read that, Camp Nottawees. And so in 1994, I travelled with two brothers and a cousin and went to the US for 6 months. We travelled around, and then I worked as a water ski instructor at a summer camp in Arizona. And after the normal summer camps, we then had 3 other camps. One for those students who'd been badly burnt, one for diabetics, and one for asthmatics. And so that shirt is from the Camp for Asthmatics, so Camp Nottawees is what that was called. But I just had an incredible experience at this summer camp. Probably the most impactful was the fact that the camp for burns victims, many children who had been burnt badly, often by an intentional act from a family member, was sponsored by the Arizona state government to go to this camp. And many of these children were in pressure bandages, and they would come down, and for the first time ever in their life, they would learn to water ski. And I was the water ski instructor helping those students get up and ski. And I remember listening to stories of absolute suffering, of kids talking about a parent intentionally pouring boiling water on them to scold them and to chastise them, or other things that had occurred out of intentionality. And for the first time in my life, I had to grapple with this idea that people experiencing sufferings through no fault of their own. And what does it look like to be a redemptive agent for Christ in their life? What does it look like to help to redeem them back into the fullness of God's intent for them? And so I was really powerfully impacted by that time, and I got a very short glimpse of the opportunity that we have to be an active agent in that. Many of the other counsellors who worked at the camp were Christians. We formed Bible studies. We spent a lot of time praying together and studying together. So during this time, I spent hours in the Bible and understood for the very first time verses I'd read my entire life, but only now was starting to see what it would look like in practice. It was also the very first time in my life that I started to think, I wonder if I could possibly be a teacher. So back when I was in the States on youth exchange, I was thinking maybe something other than a farmer. Now the first time I ever thought potentially I could be a teacher, and I had that very momentary glimpse. I also started to think about decisions that would impact life, when to get married, what career to follow, where to live. And so I came home, and 5 months later, my wife Danielle and I were engaged, and we were married in January 1996. When we got married, we'd already known each other very well for 17 years. We've been now married for almost 29 years, and we've known each other for 46 years. And so in terms of the Redlands connection, it was during this season of life that I knew many of the original students who attended Redlands College. They were the same kids that we'd known in church growing up and had been at the church youth camps with. In fact, my older brother's wife was a student at that time. I had an uncle who taught at the school. He ended up teaching there for 30 years as a Bible studies teacher. I had an aunt who was an enrichment aide at the school. So there are many of those connections in that school community during that season. The next season of my life is a season that I'm going to call Growth. And this is a polo shirt from Heights College. And so this shirt represents a season of growth and change in my life. Danielle and I had for some time discussed what our future might look like. We wanted to travel, we wanted to work together, and we knew if we were doing that in a vocational ministry context, it would either be something to do with educational health. Neither of us can manage blood very well, and so education had this growing attraction. And so in 1999 and 2000, I completed a grad dip through UNE, and this was both a painful and an exciting time. My parents had fully expected me to continue in the family businesses, where I'd been working with my parents for the last 11 years. And it came both as a shock, but also a significant disappointment to my parents that I was now talking about wanting to become a teacher. My parents were deeply disappointed in that life choice. At the same time, I was really excited to engage in a new career that would be impacting the lives of others, and I was excited. And so I was still working full-time for my parents while I was studying a grad dip. I did 2 four-week pracs. Both of them were in year 6, and one of them I chose to come down to Redlands College to do. And so I travelled from Rockhampton down to Redlands College to do that 4-week prac in year 6, and only a little while ago I found my prac report in the school archives as we were going through the archives. And I reread it and I thought, well, that's a great report. It's better than my experience that I remembered there. And so the growth that shirt represents is a really steep learning curve. I had gone for working in business in 11 years, 2 4-week pracs, both in year 6. I was then appointed as a preschool year 1, year 2 combined teacher in a very small state school. I stopped working for my parents on the Saturday and I started teaching on the following Monday, and I had no idea what I was doing. And so my wife Danielle, who was a year 1 teacher, came in every single week, 1 day a week in that entire first year of teaching, to teach me how to teach the students, and that was invaluable. So I taught that for 1 year. I then moved to Heights College, a Christian school in Rockhampton, and taught year 3 for 2 years. In the middle of my second year of teaching year 3, I was invited to become the deputy headmaster, so I then became the deputy headmaster there for 2 years. Our 3 children were born during this season of growth. Did Law in 1999, Harry in 2002, and William in 2005. Can I say that this was the most settled, delightful, fruitful, beautiful season of our life. We had a wonderful family, we were surrounded by friends, we had a wonderful job. And that takes us into our next season of challenge. This is a shirt that I wore on the Kokoda track. And so in 2006, my brother and I went to Papua New Guinea and walked the Kokoda track. It was just the 2 of us with 2 nationals as guides. And so we wore the same shirt and the same clothes the entire time, which we thought was appropriate, but for the people we flew home the plane with, they did not. But it was just it was a fantastic experience. So walking the track, it rained most of the time. We were constantly covered in mud, but it was just a wonderful time of challenge. And so in 2006, the same year, I became the headmaster of Heights College in Rockhampton. So a Peter 12 Christian school of 800 students. Having only completed a graduate diploma 5 years earlier and having only taught for 3 years and been in an administration role for 2 years. And so when we were walking the Kokoda track, my brother and I were starting to talk, well, what does the future look like? And what are your goals? And I suddenly started to realise that those goals about the future were not years away, they were right now. And I started to realise this growing sense of urgency to make sure that I was using the gifts and talents that God had given me to their full potential. I remember coming home from that walk just being really sort of not wanting to waste time as an agent of redemption of Christ's world and Christ's mission. And so a real strong desire to do that. And so I served as a headmaster of Heights College for 3.5 years. In the middle of the 4th year, I went to a normal board meeting on a Tuesday night. At the very end of that normal board meeting, the board chair handed me a letter and said, "You're finishing on Friday." And that was my final day at the school. Absolutely devastating at the time, yet probably the most significant formative experience that I've had in my life. I think everybody needs to get sacked at least once in their life because of the value that comes from it. It is a painful experience, but it is also a powerful experience. I'm a strong advocate that boards get to choose the principal that represents them in their school, and so I'm an absolute strong advocate for the process. Being the recipient of the process is always difficult. But I have the absolute fondest memories of my time at Heights College and the fondest memories of the things that I learnt. It was a delightful way for me to recognise all of the things that I did wrong and all of the things, if I ever had the chance of being a principal again, and at that stage I thought I will never be a principal again, but if I ever had the chance, there are some lessons that I learnt that I'd use. And so that brings us into the next season of life. And this season of life was all about restoration. And so this shirt here represents a season of restoration. And so my wife Danielle bought the shirt for me, and it was one of those favourite shirts that I used to preach in at our church. And so if I think back to this time just beforehand of when I was sacked as the principal, my wife and I both agree that 2009, that year, was our worst year as a family. The year started with my dad passing away after an illness. In the middle of the year, I was terminated from my role, and at the end of the year, we moved to Brisbane. Everything that was safe, secure, that we loved, we lost. We moved away from all of our family, from all of our friends, to a brand new town, to a brand new church, to a brand new community. And so I think of that when I look at this shirt here, it's a time of being restored, because my wife bought that shirt for me as soon as we got to Brisbane, and I started preaching in the church that we moved to very quickly, and that was the shirt that I regularly wore. And so our family was starting to settle in, we were starting to re-establish a sense of meaning and purpose. Our 3 children all started school at Redlands College in 2011, and my wife Danielle started teaching there in year 1. In fact, you'll see in this photo, I'm actually wearing that same shirt in that photo there as well. I loved it so much. And so I travelled to Israel in both 2011 and 2012, and this was the only long sleeve shirt that I took, so I wore it every single day, and it's still covered in sunscreen stains. But this shirt has always had a connection with my Christian faith. As I walked around Israel, sat where Christ gave the Sermon on the Mount, on the shores of Galilee, the synagogue in Capernaum, in every one of those areas, I thought afresh. God, the creator of the world, humbled himself to become a creation. And that creation, where God operates outside of the constraints of time and physicality, his son, Jesus Christ, came to earth in the constraints of time and physicality, and I was right there where he was to come to restore the broken relationship between mankind back to him again. And I was just overwhelmed by that experience there. And so during this season of life, I also completed a Doctor of Ministry through Lipscomb University in the US. And so for 3 years, I went to the US every 6 months for a month at a time to study this doctorate degree. My research was on faith formation in Christian schools, and Redlands College was one of the schools that I did the faith formation research on. And in that role, I had an opportunity to visit schools throughout the world and throughout Australia. And so that brings me now to my final shirt, which is a Redlands College polo shirt. And I call this polo shirt Purpose, or this season Purpose. After 7 years of working for Christian Schools Australia, where I worked with principals and boards and schools, and I was in schools every day travelling throughout Australia, after 7 years I realised that every one of my relationships is superficial in the most positive sense of the word, in that you just come in, engage and leave again. There's no depth of travelling through life with somebody. And I really wanted to be back in a school community where you get to know people and travel life with them, where you get to see them on good days and bad days, where you get to know what's going before to where they are now. And I really wanted to get back into a school. The position of principal at Redlands College was advertised, and originally I did not apply for it. I was actually very reluctant. I just had this catch in my spirit that I'm just not sure if this is what God is calling me to. And so it was only not until the closing day that I submitted an application for the role of principal at Redlands. And I was offered the position and just recognised as I paused the way God had been on that journey all the way through. This is now my 8th year as principal at Redlands, and I will say absolutely there is nowhere else I would rather be, no other role that I would rather be in than as principal at Redlands College. Yet whenever somebody asks me about my role, I always say to them very clearly, my role is transition principal. And what I mean by that is that I know that there are pioneers who've gone before me, people who've done outstanding work in that community to build it and where it is. And I know that others will come after me. And my prayer and hope is they'll do a much better job than what I've done. I'm simply serving for this season of time, entrusted with the responsibility to use our gifts and talents to the best that we can in the community that we're entrusted to. And that is my heart's desire. I know that it will finish at some time. And when it finishes, I will be deeply thankful for the opportunity that I've had. So let me close with these final comments here. As a school community, what is most important to me? Number one, I want every single person who steps onto the Redlands College campus to be blessed by that experience. It doesn't matter if they know Christ, if they've got any relationship, none at all. We want Redlands College to be a blessing in the broader community. And secondly, we want to demonstrate hospitality as a vehicle to invite people to come to know Christ. We know on the road to Emmaus that those two disciples there didn't know Christ until they actually sat down and had a meal and he was fully revealed. We know the resurrected Christ on the beach cooking fish wasn't fully revealed to those disciples until they shared a meal. And so we focus a lot on hospitality as the vehicle for people to come to know Christ and engage in a relationship with him. And can I say, what an awesome opportunity to be able to do that. So thank you for letting me share. There's something powerful about people's narrative, and I love hearing yours. This year, we're getting staff to share every Wednesday morning at a staff devotional how God brought them to Redlands, and I'm loving those stories. They've been fantastic. So thank you, Harry.
I'm a little biased, but I thought that was fantastic. Stay up here. Stay up. We now have an opportunity to ask any questions. I'm sure Dad would take questions on any jacket, any time period, about anything. If you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone.
Thank you for a lovely testimony. That was terrific to hear and really love to share. Any specific prayer needs for Redlands College or for you from the Christian Business Network?
And Darren, I appreciate that. People ask me all the time, can I pray for you? And I say absolutely. What I particularly value prayer for is for wisdom and discernment. We all want to be good leaders. We want to do the very best that we can do. And I know if it's up to me, I'm going to do a terrible job. The only way good decisions and wise decisions get made is for the Holy Spirit to be involved in them. So I particularly value discernment. I particularly value wisdom. I particularly value our community being a place of healing for those who come with brokenness. There are many families where the mum and the dad are separated and the only time they engage together is over their child's education. We want to be an agent of redemption in that moment, and so prayers to be a better agent of redemption. Very good. Anything else?
Hey, thanks, Andrew, for sharing. As a parent with kids entering adulthood, what are your main tips?
Easy how you answer.
Look, Alex, that's a great question. Let me try and answer based on our own experience, which Harry can say may or may not have been effective. A couple of things that we wanted to do. Number one, we always wanted our kids to be happy to bring their friends to our house. That was really important for us. We wanted to get to know their friends. We wanted to get to know their friends' parents, and we would often invite their friends' parents over to share a meal with us so we could get to know them. Number two, we always wanted to make sure that we did holidays together. We are blessed that our adult children still want a holiday with us. We know that's not always the case, and we also know that our financial contributions to that are a significant reason why they do. But we are blessed that they continue to want to holiday with us and spend time with us, because there's something powerful about being out of the home environment and being able to sit down around a campfire and have a chat and share. There's something really powerful about that. The other thing we also wanted to say to our kids is when you make mistakes, and we know you will because we did, we want you to feel comfortable coming to talk to us about that so we can engage with you there. Now, Alex, that may or may not work, but that's three things that we tried to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, I always felt comfortable bringing friends, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you'd just be in a group, and someone would say, whose house do we want to go to? And, you could always say, yours.
Thanks, Harry, and thank you, Andrew, for a fabulous talk. I've noticed in Redlands College there's this wonderful emphasis on character formation, and I wondered if you could share with us what you ask of parents to partner with the school in that important task in the formation of a child. Thank you.
Well, the reality is that education and formation are inseparable from each other. It doesn't matter where you go to be educated, formation will occur at the same time. It just depends how clearly articulated that formative concept is. And so for us at Redlands College, we're very, very clear to say that we are an over-evangelical Christian school. We know that parents have a wide range of choice in who they partner with in the education and formation of their children. So the first thing that we want to do is to be very, very clear right from the start to say, we'll be educating and forming your child from a clear Christian perspective. If, as a parent, then you choose to partner with Redlands College for your child's education, then you're choosing for your child to be fully engaged in those formative activities, and we're very, very clear about that. We want parents on campus. We love parents being on campus because there's something significant about parents being involved in that. We are always looking for ways to have extracurricular activities where parents are involved. And whether that's a high tea for mums and daughters or an archery night for dads and sons or whatever it is, that's a really important part of it. Communication is a really important part of it. So, when the year 9s go over to Vanuatu, every single day there's being photos being sent back to them. We get parents to write a letter, a hard copy letter for their son or daughter before they go to Vanuatu. The teacher takes them over, and then in the middle of the trip, Tuesday of week 2, which is the lowest point in every trip, they get those letters out for the parents and give them to students. And that's about partnering with parents in that formative moment for their son or daughter. So it's something I'm really passionate about. We can always do better, but it's something we really want to engage with.
I was originally going to ask if you had a favourite child, but I won't do that in Harry's present. Andrew, thanks for your presentation. It was wonderful. I guess a father of young kids and also being a school chaplain, can you tell us what you see as the top 1 or 2 challenges for young people in our society at the moment, as in school-age young people?
For me, I would talk about it's the continued demand of comparison making. And so whatever the vehicle for that is, whether it's social media or whatever it is, the continued demand on students to be constantly comparing themselves against an unreal expectation. And that is such a debilitating thought process to be involved in for any students, regardless of their age. So that would be number 1. I guess number 2, losing the love of learning and the love of relationships with others. And for us, that's really important. When we talk to students about subjects, we constantly say, choose the subjects you love the most. In terms of engaging with those first. And when you're in relationships, you're in a relationship with other students, with other staff, because of the inherent value that comes from journeying through life with somebody. So moving away from the constant need to compare against an unrealistic expectation, making sure that what you're doing has a love component to it, that you're really drawn into that. There are things in life that things that we do that will drain life from us, and things that we do that will give us life. Identify that as soon as you can and focus on those things. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. I've really enjoyed our time together. Thank you.